Hello fellow woodworkers, welcome to this week's New Year edition of the Garage Workshop. I hope you all had a fantastic holiday and Happy New Year to all of you. In this 2 video set, I'm going to be making a new frame for hanging my running medals. Let's get started. So for this week's project, I want to revisit one of my fails from 2022. I'll put a link to it up here in case you haven't seen it. And it was the running medal holder that I tried to make using the bandsaw, which was far too ambitious. But I've been thinking a lot since that video about a different way or a better way to show or present my medals that I got for running. So I came across this piece of this piece of glass, and so I came across this piece of glass, which is fairly substantial in weight. It is quite heavy, and it measures 76 centimetres or 760mm by 26 or 260. Now, this I think would be a big enough medal holder for all the running medals I'm ever likely to get, because each running medal probably is about sort of between 10 and 15 centimetres in height, sometimes a bit wider, but generally that's the size. So rather than starting with the wood out, I'm actually going to start with the glass and work my way back. And I've brought some wood, some edging strip, pine edging strip, from my local DIY store, and I'm going to basically make a really simple frame to go around a deeper box. And the deeper box is going to house the glass, obviously, but the deeper box is going to have sort of an insert, so I can hang the medals on it but run the cables or thread the cables through and have them down the back. So all you're actually going to see is the medal, not the cable. I know if you buy a lot of commercially bought running medal hangers, you actually get to see the ribbon as well, but for me that's not as important as actually seeing the medal itself, which is the most important bit. So I'm going to start by sort of going backwards and taking the glass, and first of all I'm going to measure and leave like a 5mm gap all the way around the edge, which I'm going to use blue masking tape for, because that's going to represent the groove that the glass is going to slide into in the frame. So once I've got that measurement, I'm then going to start making a really basic frame for the glass, and I'm then going to put a sort of outer edging strip around that frame to hide it as well. So first thing to do, mark the glass up, put on the masking tape, and then start taking the measurements to cut the strip. Let's do that now. So the first thing I did was get some anti-back wipes and gave the glass a really good wipe down. It's been lying around the garage for a while, like most things in the garage that's been laying around for a while. It was covered in dust. When I did that, I set my square to 5mm, and I just use a board marker all the way around to give me a 5mm strip, just to give me an edge to run the tape on. And I wanted to put this border around because that 5mm was going to be the depth in the wood of the frame. So I knew if the blue of the tape was covered up, I'd got the correct depth when I came to put it through the router. So I spent quite a lot of time on marking and doing the measuring. You know what they say, measure twice, cut once, I think, whatever it is. And then I offered it up and put it in, and I'd set a stop block up, you can see just behind my wrist there, which I thought was going to work, but unfortunately it didn't, because when I did the second cut, you'll see in a second, I got the cut slightly wrong. On the second cut was about 4 or 5mm out, which was a bit of a pain, to be honest. You can see there the difference between the two of them. Fortunately, it was easy enough to level them up, and I got them perfect, as you can see. The next stage was to offer them up and just see if they were roughly the right size. Now, I deliberately left an overhang here because obviously it's better to have too much wooden to cut back than to have not enough. So when I was satisfied that the top and the bottom of the frames were fine, I then went on to marking out the edges from the side. And again, all these measurements were taken from my original measurement of the glass, which I did earlier in the video. I wanted to make sure all my angles were exactly right. So I did spend quite a long time with the measuring and marking up. And I think, as I said in my New Year's review video, I do want to spend more time this year trying to make my products much more high quality than they are. So when I did that, I took them to the table saw. Luckily, I had no such issue this time. I made 2 absolutely identical cuts, which was fantastic. I then offered the side pieces up just to make sure, and they do look sort of slightly wrong here, but they're not. They are exactly as they should be on both sides. Obviously, a little bit left over, which was easy to trim off in the final part when I got down to that stage. So, having been happy with that, it was time to set up the router table, and I used my square here to set it up. It was just a 5mm deep initially set up. I actually did change this, and in a minute you'll see when I put the test piece through, I really wasn't happy with how the router blade was going through the wood. It was smoking a lot, and there was a lot of burning on the wood when I took the test piece off, which, considering there is a potential that you might actually see the groove, I really didn't want to have that. I really wanted to make sure that it went through as well as it could, and as you'll see now when I fed it through, although it did go through the wood okay, I am actually applying quite a lot of pressure, and although it's not struggling in terms of the revs of the router, it's exactly as I expected it to be. There is a lot of smoke, and there was quite a strong burning smell, so I wasn't very pleased with that. So I decided to just step the cuts up. So just off camera, I dropped the router bit and I made it about 2.5 mil, and then ran all of the track through, all of the track, every piece of wood. And when I was satisfied that they'd all been through, I then went back and did the second pass. And I have to say, it was a much easier pass, and it gave me a much better sort of quality of cut, which obviously is what I'm looking for. So after I'd done that test piece, I just offered it up to the glass, made sure I was happy, and then I could begin the process of running through all my completed strips. Just a reminder, whenever you're routing out here, please wear the correct protection. It's important to wear. You can see I'm wearing a respirator and safety glasses, and obviously my ear defenders. So when I'd done that and I had the strip out, I just checked that it worked and it fitted, and it was really tight, which was fantastic. So then I knew I was able to go ahead and do it. I actually ran 2 sort of sets, like parallel tracks through this. One for the frame and one for the actual glass. Then just got my hand sander out and I just knocked back everything. There was a odd little bit of sort of trapped wood. You can see me there. That's what I'm taking out with a screwdriver. There was the odd little bit of trapped wood, and this sanding block I've got, it's a work zone one from Aldi. It's got like a triangle shaped end, so it's really good for sort of getting in the grooves. But there was a little bit of cutout, that's what I'm taking out there, that just didn't come out naturally. But as you can see, the track is really nice. This is prior to doing the second groove. This is just why I was doing the first one. I then offered them up all around the glass just to fix. I didn't want them to be too loose, but I didn't want them to be too tight that they weren't, movable. And obviously, you need to allow possibly for the wood to move or, sweat or expand when the weather changes. But this was more about sort of making sure that everything was there. And as you could see there was an overhang on both of the sides, which I cut off, and you can see it there. Now, this again is just me clamping it just to make sure that it all fits, because obviously the glass seating inside has got to go 5mm all the way around. But I was very pleased with how it looked. Just you can't see it off screen, but I'm just looking to make sure it's equal. And just a little sort of flyby shot there for you to see it. There's nothing glued here. The clamp is literally just to keep it all together. And here you can see where I put the second track in, which is for a sort of inside, and you can see it matches up really nice. Yeah, I'm putting like an inside frame, which you'll see in a minute, and that's more just to stop the sort of piece of wood that's got the medals on it sort of falling forwards, if you see what I mean. But very happy with how it looked and how that bit turned out. Then I went on to making the backing plate, which is the one that is going to fit inside the actual frame. I just took an old piece of sort of white, it was the back of an IKEA wardrobe, I think, that I had lying around the workshop, and cut that up. Although, to be fair, I probably should have done that a slightly better way, but I got the size I wanted. and I did have the opportunity to keep popping back to check the size. You can just see me going over there now and sliding it in to make sure it's the right size. It's really difficult to do. You don't want to sort of underdo it and you don't want to overdo it. And I was back and forward to the table saw quite a lot. In fact, this is probably the most I've used the table saw in one of my projects for quite a long time. So I was able to just sort of, you know, literally sort of finagle it in place. But as you can see there, very happy with how it turned out. Now, the next thing to do was to create the inner frame. So I did this test to see whether it was possible to start with a wood and raise my table saw. Now, I have to give a disclaimer out. Please do not copy this technique. And please do not use your table saw in this manner if you are not 100% confident with how it works. So what I wanted to do was just raise the blade up and cut the inside out, and that was my test piece. So after the test piece and I was happy, I then went on to the full piece, and as you can see I put a disclaimer there. And I'm going to get flamed in the comments for doing this, but I really took my time. And as you can see, I used a push stick and my hand was never close enough to the blade. But I wanted to try and do this cut. I wanted to see if I could, well, A, see if I had the technique to do it, and B, see whether it was possible. But I was extremely careful. But again, you know, if you're not confident using your table saw, then please do not try a cut like this, because it can be incredibly dangerous. And as you can see, that's why I've left this clip full time in real time. I really took my time to make sure I got this absolutely 100% accurate, but did it in a very safe manner. So when the cut was finished and I was happy, I just obviously had overcut slightly. So I just got out some wood filler, knowing I was going to be spraying this anyway. I just got out some wood filler and just filled the gaps in on the corner. There were just a couple of sort of overcuts, I suppose is the best way to say it. But they were tidied up with a filler and it wasn't an issue. And obviously, as I said, I was then going to spray it. And to contrast the sort of colour I've got, I went for a sort of grey spray. This is just like a rattle can spray paint from Aldi, I think it came from, or Lidl, one of the two. So I just gave it a quick spray. Then I moved on to the backing board, and this is the backing board that's actually going to have the medals in it. And I did this at this stage because I had quite a lot of bits I wanted to work on, but while I had the table saw out, I just wanted to get this down. Now I deliberately picked this board that's got all the little holes in it that you can see, the perforations, because what my plan was to open a gap or cut through between a couple of those perforations to make a sort of bigger gap, really. And that sort of bigger gap will let me get the sort of plastic that's on the medals. Some of the medals have got like a plastic clip. It would allow me to do that. So I measured it. I'd previously measured it, and obviously I used the same measurements that I'd used for the inside frame that you just saw me spray paint. And then I cut it down to the right size. I just put it aside for a minute, and then I moved on to putting in the drill marks. This is where the dowels are going to go to connect my outer frame. So these are the bits that you've just seen me route out, and what's going to happen is they're going to have dowels out when it's all constructed, and then the outer frame is going to go around that, but it's sort of in the other way, so it's going to look a bit sort of L-shaped, the wood. And this was my first, you can see I knocked it off, I realised then I had to clamp it. That was my first mark, my first test just on a random piece of wood to make sure I got the depth of the dowels right. So after I did that, I just marked positions, 3 on the top, 3 dowel holes on the top, 3 on the bottom, and just 1 at each side. And I deliberately just put 1 at each side because I know there's going to be a lot of strength from those 2 bits of wood joining up to the other 2 bits of wood. So I found the exact middle and just put a mark there. And then I went back to the pillar drill, and then I just spent some time drilling all the holes in. And again, I'd preset the depth. I want to say these are 10 mil, maybe 8 mil
dowels. They're just ones that I'd salvaged from an IKEA unit that I'd had before, but I just got it on there, and it's nice to actually use my bench drill. I don't get to use it that often, so it's just a work zone one. Next, I gave everything a once over with a sander, and that was in preparation for painting. Because it's smooth plain timber, it's sort of got a sheen on it, and I wanted to take that off just so it made the wood accept the paint a little bit more. Love this DeWalt sander. I've got a 10-minute tool review on it if you want to see it. I'll put a link in the description, but brilliant. And then the last stage was just to give it a coat of paint. This is B&Q's own brand. The colour's called Princeton, but I just love the colour of it.
So thanks for joining me on part 1 of this video, and part 2 will come out on Monday next week. Hope you have a fantastic week, fellow woodworkers. Catch you next week. Bye bye.